How you doing, Karalyn?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So I've seen you in the chat since the beginning of my live, so thank you for hanging with me. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
no problem.
Yeah, and you've made some pretty interesting points in the chat, so thanks for waiting.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So, um, I guess where I could start from is kind of even like with my walk with Christ, because a lot of the atheists that I have met, all of them
Mm-hmm.
come from similar backgrounds like you, like they were raised in a church and made
Yeah.
their decision on their own. So my family was strict 7-day Adventist, and I could tell you, like, from my experience personally, like, it was really hard to build that connection with God when, like, there
Mm-hmm.
was so much judgment going on within the church. And
Mm-hmm.
personally, I felt like when I left the church, I felt worse about myself than coming out than going
Mm.
in.
I'm sorry to hear
Um,
that.
yeah, well, I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. Um, I can't deny God based off of my personal experiences that I've had with Him. Um, I don't want to go too much in depth with it because there's like a friend's legal issue and all that sort of stuff.
Oh,
But
that's
He did
okay. You don't
save
have.
me.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. It's okay. I believe you.
He did save me from a really bad situation, and I know a lot
Well,
of
I'm
people
happy to hear that.
are like, how do you know? How do you like know that you're communicating or that you're talking to God and all that sorts of stuff? And I really want to go back to one of the other members that was speaking with you. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot like love. Like, how do you know that you're in love? Well, because it's a feeling. There's not
Yeah.
necessarily evidence based off of it, but that's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of my experiences that I've been through with him, like, I would experience it, but then it would align with the Bible. And the reason why
Mm.
I ended up going back to church was my friend that was in his drug problem and legal issues. Like, he was all or nothing. Like, if he was in the Word, he was doing good and good things were happening for him. If he was out of the Word, like, he would stumble a lot and, fall into some bad situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him that I would drive him to church so that I could be a good friend, being like, yeah, this is for you. That's good, whatever. Well, when I went to church, that whole sermon was literally a reflection explaining everything that I just went through.
Mm.
Um, so the Bible does state that, it's a lot about walking in faith and not by sight and really
Mm-hmm.
taking a leap. And I know that's really hard for a lot of people to understand, but I'm sure there's a situation even in your life where you just kind of had to take a leap and hope for the best, and then it worked out. That's where I get my proof, is being aware and in tune about everything that's going around me, not necessarily what everybody else is telling me to do,
Mm-hmm.
but what I'm seeing outside of that, and then getting the confirmation that it is of him.
Yeah.
The following speaker, like, I could tell he's really passionate about his beliefs, but there's still a lot of things like I don't align with. Like, I don't believe a baby is born believing that there's God, because they're still developing. I think that they have more of an understanding of like supernatural things, because there's not so much temptation and negative thoughts and
Mm-hmm.
different things that kind of make you second guess, oh, is this what it is? But I don't believe that you know from the beginning. I think a lot of it is like with your walk, you tend to know more and you become
Mm-hmm.
more sensitive to it. And I don't believe that a lot of religions always align with what God's saying, but God is love. And when you start taking that leap of faith and you start building a connection with him, it's like you get like supernatural peace when everything about your life is chaotic. Like, in my current situation, like, a normal person, I think, that doesn't have that relationship would probably suffer from stress, anxiety, and depression. But because
Yeah.
I'm so like into connecting with him and reading the Bible and listening to other people's testimonies, Like, I'm at peace. Like, I know that everything is going to be okay because I know
Mm-hmm.
he's there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And with what he is calling us to do is simply a relationship with him. Just like you want a relationship with your kids. If your kids fall and they do something bad, that doesn't mean that you're not going to love them. But that means that you still want to have a relationship. You still want them to come to you if they have problems. You still want to help them in every way that you possibly can.
Yeah.
But if they don't make that decision to turn to you, it's really hard to help them.
Right.
And I'm a believer that's exactly how God works.
Okay.
You know, he doesn't, like, he even says too, like, blessed is those who's not offended by me, you know, and the enemy, like, he works in strongholds. He works in negative thought processes. And a lot of the stuff that happens in real life, like even like how things end up aligning, all starts in our mind. You know, like science has even proven it too with like people that have like diseases or cancer or whatever. The ones that change their thoughts and are like, I'm going to survive this. I'm going to keep a positive mindset. You know, I'm going to keep striving. I'm not going to let any negative thought hold me down. They usually do pretty well during their treatment. And if at anything, they end up having peace through all that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I see what you're saying, and I can really hear the emotion coming out. So I just want to say first that I'm glad you've gotten through your dark time, you know, that you've come out on the other side. Regardless of how that happened, the important thing is that you got it through on the other side. So congratulations on that. And I can relate to a lot of what you were saying because I've had a lot of those same struggles myself. In February 13th, I celebrated 12 years of sobriety. So I totally, thank you. So I understand, at least at minimum, I understand what your friend's going through. And the struggles to get to that point. And so what I want to ask you is, because the reason I do these lives, Karalyn, is it's very interesting to me why people believe what they believe and then how they figured out it's true. And not only is it, for me, I get to understand better why people believe what they believe. Because in my mind, if anyone were to convince me, for me, I would need to understand their belief like inside and out. And on the other side, if I were to convince anybody, which I'm not really here to do, but if I were to convince anybody, I would need to understand why they believe what they believe. Does that make sense? Because if I don't really understand why a person believes what they believes, how could I ever persuade them, give them what they need to hear to change their mind? Am I making sense?
No, I think you're making complete sense. And I think kind of where a lot of people do end up leading astray and getting lost is because I feel there's so many people that try to force it on them when it was never intended to be a force, you know, upon somebody. And that's why free will so beautiful is it's your choice. I mean, we can have a conversation and you agree or disagree with me. That doesn't change, you know, how the rest of the day is going to go, or it shouldn't.
Right.
But I see so many people in the church that they're, you know, we call them Bible thumpers in a sense. And it's like, if we go back to the Bible, it says that we're supposed to love and discern with love. How can you like go through and judge somebody and knock them completely down when the Bible says against that?
I hear you.
So
let me ask you this, Karalyn. How confident are you that God exists?
I'm 110%.
110%? Okay. That's strong. So I've talked to all 100%ers today. So sometimes, you know, it varies. I get 100, 90, 50. One, I got 25. They said they were 25% convinced. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So it runs all across the spectrum. But today, I'm fortunate enough, all 100%ers, but you 110%. So let me ask you, what is your best reason that you're 110% confident? I think I heard it somewhere in here, but I want to hear it again from you. Like, because you probably have a lot of reasons, Karalyn. But we don't have time to go into all of them today. But like, pick your best. What's your best reasons? Like, if that reason turned out to not be true, then it would either lower your confidence significantly or you would stop believing altogether. So what reason would you say that is?
I'm going to go back and say that a lot of it, I think, is going to be my mindset with it.
Your
And
mindset?
yeah, because, and the reason why I say that is like, you could be in like the perfect storm, right? Where everything's dark, everything's raining down on you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to see, like a flower or something like creeping through the cracks, like that's almost my best way of describing it, because it's his way of showing me that he's always there with me throughout it. But if I'm constantly looking at all the reasons why he isn't there or why he's not there, like, then it's going to be hard to be a believer.
Yeah.
He offers, he gives me so much confirmation that he's there, and it's not something that just happens overnight. Like it's a walk, and it's like, we'll never have all the answers, but it's a walk. You're always growing, and there's times where, you do struggle, but there's always some sort of a glimpse of confirmation that proves his existence every single day.
And when you say confirmation, do you mean like what do you mean? Like, well, I heard the flower growing out of the sidewalk, and I think you said earlier you went to a service, and then you heard the sermon, and it was exactly what you had been going through. Is that the type of confirmation you're talking about?
Yes.
Like personal experience?
It's experience, but when he confirms in so many different ways. Like it can be like an actual like life moment, like like if you're looking for a job or something and the perfect one just pops up. Or he also uses people as well. Like there's been times where like I was working on my faith and I didn't know if he was there, and I had a stranger come up to me and just randomly say, I can see God's presence over you.
Okay.
It's
all right.
It's almost being open up to the idea that the evidence can be shown in any way, any possible.
Yeah, I hear that. I understand.
Fact or evidence, like if you're looking for a crime scene, but even so, like the Bible does even go back through and explain what his word is. And the Bible was written by so many different people, by like 1,000 years span difference in different areas, and not everything even made it into the Bible.
Yeah.
There's a movie, it's called Case for Christ, and it's about this atheist who is trying to prove that Jesus never existed. And every avenue that he tried to prove that could like determine that Christ never lived, he was proven wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was scientific proof that Jesus died on the cross. And and it's all based off facts. So that's one that I would challenge you to watch. It's really good.
I've actually seen it. So yes, I've actually seen it. But okay. So for you, it is you get confirmations in your world, in your real world, like just doing everyday, you living your everyday life. You get confirmations constant. They come in for you, and that tells you, yep, God is real. God exists. Okay. And so just to be clear, if you found out that these confirmations weren't true and didn't point to God's existence, and you verified to your satisfaction that this is indeed, these confirmations, they're just not what I thought they were, what would that do to your 110% confidence?
I don't see how that could actually be proven. And
I'm not saying it would, and I'm not saying there is information or evidence like that. I'm just saying if you found that, if that happened, if you discovered information, what would that do to your confidence?
I don't see how it could be discovered, because I've already walked through all those stages, and there was confirmation that I was in the right place at the right time. And a lot of those things that I was questioning, I never spoke out.
Right. Well, so because I don't know if you heard my conversation earlier with Bench Taco. I don't know if you were there. We were talking about possibility and how you test possibility. There's a test for logic, seeing if something is logically possible. And there's two parts to it. It's either self-contradictory, like it's a squared circle, or it's just absurd. That, like, marshmallows have bones. That's absurd, right? So if so information. So are you saying it's impossible that you would ever discover information, or that there's information even out there? That it's impossible that there's information out there that says God doesn't, that these confirmations that you have aren't from God?
Yeah, I strongly believe it's not possible, just from everything that I've
Okay.
heard.
Is it self-contradictory?
No.
Is it absurd?
For somebody that doesn't have the understanding, they would think so.
How do you think that would be absurd?
Well, I mean, some people that haven't never experienced
Right.
or heard God's voice would probably think that's absurd.
Right, but would they actually be right? That's what I mean. They would think it's absurd, but is it actually absurd?
No.
Yeah. So let me go back to that. So is it absurd that there's something out there that could say, yeah, your experiences, it's not from God. It's just totally absurd.
Yes.
Just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's possible, right? That's all I'm saying. It's possible. Not that it is or that you will. I'm just saying it's possible. Like a unicorn. Unicorns possible. They don't exist, but they're possible, right? It's not absurd, right?
Right. I mean, I can't say that a unicorn by fact isn't real because I haven't seen one. But
right.
For somebody that has seen one and it's factual for him, like, then there's no way that could be debunked.
Right. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, and I'm just really focusing on this concept of possibility because like I said, you're saying, hey, there's no possible way that I'm ever going to know, or that there's data out there that'll tell me that my experiences aren't from God. And see, I'm not trying to persuade you that they're not. All I'm trying to ask you is, I'm just trying to see how strong this reason is for you that helps your confidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no.
That's all I'm trying to.
No,
yeah.
The reason why I'm gonna go back to throw it in with love. Like, I'm assuming you're married, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you love your wife.
Yes.
How do you know that you love your wife?
I know I love my wife because when I think of who I want to spend the rest of my life with, she is my image. It's her. I don't think of anyone else I'd rather spend the rest of my life with. When I think I know I love her is because even though she drives me crazy, because people, hey, you know what? People drive each other crazy at times. And at times she drives me crazy. And there is no wanting on my part to say, okay, it's time to throw in the towel. It's time. I can't deal with this anymore. I don't want to do this. No, I stay. I want to. I envision having a future. Like, I think of things in, like, what we're going to be doing 20 years from now, 25 years from now, 15 years from now. When I wake up next to her, like, I can't sleep when she takes a trip. Like, if I'm sleeping by myself, I can't sleep. I cannot sleep at all because I miss her so much. So I miss her when she's not here right now. I miss her right now. She's doing a spa day with her friends and her sister.
And that love for her grows with your experiences with her, right?
Yes. And it is, you're right. And it's based on, there is a reciprocation of that. Like, because I have been when I was younger, I remember having a crush on somebody and they didn't feel the same way about me. And, like, I thought I loved them, and turned out to be not, because I wasn't getting anything back. I wasn't getting anything in return. So I may have loved them, but they didn't love me the same. there is inherently a mechanism in which love grows because you're getting reciprocation back. So I may have cared for that person immensely, but when they made it clear to me that they didn't feel the same, well, eventually my what I thought was love just waned. It just waned. So I don't think that's the person the same way. But yeah, but
So
with
getting
my
back
wife,
on
it's
track.
not like that. Yeah.
That's exactly what my relationship with
Okay.
is.
Well, that's
You know,
beautiful. Yeah,
and
that's a beautiful thing.
it is a reciprocation. Like he loves all of his children the same, but it's a lot like, okay, so if we put it like in a high school spectrum, you're crushing on
Yeah.
someone, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you have all these other people like in between you, in the middle, like putting in, thoughts like, oh, you're never going to be good enough, or, oh, they'll
Yeah.
never be good enough for you, or whatever. That's the best way I could say, like, having that relationship and knowing who he is just like that.
Yeah.
So many worldly things are those friends in high school that get in between. But when you actually solely work on that relationship with him and it does reciprocate and you just build and it gets stronger, like for you to tell or to ask me like, well, how do I know? Like if I was told that wasn't of him, that's the same almost if somebody was to say, well, what if your wife actually never loved you? You know what I mean?
That'd
Like
be
you
pretty
can't
painful.
explain it to somebody else
Mm-hmm.
that isn't in that situation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think a lot of religions and a lot of churches and different things like that, I feel a lot of time they get in between our connection of actually getting to know him and getting to see him and getting to witness.
Yeah.
Like he's there and he's openly available. But if he's standing on your right and you're constantly looking on your left, like it's not that he's not there. It's that you might not be on the right open mindset.
Yeah, it's a good point.
To be able to see him.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Because I can, like for me, I think I pretty articulately explain why I love my wife, and I can verify, like I can demonstrate to my satisfaction that she loves me or I love her. I can determine that to be true. So, how did you determine that these personal experiences? Like, what steps did you take to determine that these confirmations point to God?
So aside from going and having, like even seeing it in the Bible that what I went through with him, I'm going to say a good example is the reason why I'm here today. In that situation with that one friend, I'll say this, like he was hanging out with some bad people and there was one that was actually out to get me. Like he made it known he was out to get me.
Wow.
And miraculously, like 2 days later, he ended up in a situation to where he was completely out of the equation. You can never touch him.
I see. Wow. That's pretty powerful. And that spoke to you. So you survived sounds like a life-threatening situation. You survived that, and the Bible. So those two things were how you determine, like that. Those two things told you this is true.
And peace.
And what?
And peace.
And peace. So a sense of peace. So a feeling of peace. Okay. And if someone from another belief, because I'm pretty sure we could probably find somebody from the Hindu religion who has had a life-threatening situation, who used the Bhagavad Gita and found a sense of peace. And they say those are the reasons why the singular consciousness is true, and Krishna and Ganesh and Vishnu and all those. Does that make their religion true?
I would argue that because I'm going to go back to the Bible and the Word. because the Bible and it's the word of God. It's even quoting him. And again, it's from many different areas, different people, different time frames.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen, if it doesn't align with what he says, it's pretty easy to debunked. But I think a lot of people are giving too much power to the religion than the relationship with him.
People are giving too much power to the religion rather than the relationship. Interesting. So if we found, because you did say the Bible is the word of God, and if I heard you correctly, you said that other religions can be easy to debunk using the word of God. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Okay. And what if a Hindu brought out some holy books and they had some scriptures that in the Bhagavad Gita that say, see, these things, they confirm my belief, and these are the experiences that I had, and they debunk the Bible. Couldn't they say the same about you?
But which you would have to compare the different documents, I guess.
Sure.
Because the Bible is the one that is, there's more Bibles out there than there is any other religious books.
Well, so is it the number of copies that make it true? Because
how many testimonies out there align with which religious book, and by how many?
It's the number of testimonies. So like say
real life, that's like the living word. That's what people are experiencing day to day. And there's a lot of people who do have testimonies that not necessarily have been documented.
Right.
But so how many of their testimonies would align with the Bible versus other religious documents? But at the same time, though, like even the Bible and some of those other religious documents have been translated so many different times, we might actually out that a bunch of those religious books and the Bible, a lot of them probably have very common similarities.
Right. They have common similarities. So, well, because there's almost, I think there's over 1 billion people in India, right? That's where Hinduism has come from, and that's where it's the dominant religion. So, I was asking this earlier of somebody, I don't know if you were here, but, it was Dean. I don't know if you were here for that, but I asked him, there's Hindus witnessing gurus perform miracles, and I asked him, well, how many of those would it take for you to convert to Hinduism? So, like, what's the number that we're looking at, Karalyn, where it's now a legitimate claim? Like, what's the number of testimonies we need? Is it just whoever has the most testimonies is the right religion?
But again, we're still trying to make this religion based, and I'm saying that it should be relationship based.
Right. But I think where I'm going with this is that it is relationship based, but why is it a relationship based on? Because you're using the Bible to base this relationship on, and so couldn't somebody just use the Bhagavad Gita as a relationship, as to base their relationship onto the higher consciousness? Like, what's the difference?
Well, then again, we should be asking what exactly it is that they believe, and who do they believe is all. If there's a higher entity, then obviously that. Some people are obviously saying that they believe in God or gods or whatever it might be, but what makes them determine that there's three or if there's more? Because most religions, they do recognize that there is one God. There are some that say that there's not, but where are they getting all their? I guess that's where we need to separate what is coming from the ancient documents versus what is coming from people taking things to a far, left or right direction. We see that a lot in churches, because I've heard so many people say, well, I used to go to church and they would teach the word, but then they would do this, which was completely opposite of what the word
Yeah.
And they were all wrapping that up in religion instead of the relationship.
Okay. Let me ask it a different way. What do you think your relationship would be like with God if you were born in Calcutta?
In Calcutta, I don't know, because I'm not born there. I
Right.
wouldn't
But
assume,
do you
and
think
I
you'd
could
still
say
be,
that it's going to be
would
the
you,
same.
yeah, would you still be, do you think you would have been raised in the Seventh-day Adventist church and gone through what you went
I
through?
mean,
And
there's a good chance that I wouldn't necessarily be raised in the Seventh-day Adventist church, because
right,
different areas separate different religions.
right.
But what I'm trying to say is a lot of, like, when you look at the core part, there's a lot of common similarities.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is where God is trying to call all of us to come back to. Now, again, it's our free will. It's our choice to either accept it or deny it. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
your choice if you want to walk with blinders on. It's somebody's choice if they want to focus and give power to drama, or if they want to give power to stones, or if they want to give power to this or give power to that. But does that actually mean that's where that's actually coming from?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you on that point. I totally
Does
agree with
that
you.
does that give you inner peace, or do you like still celebrate your crystals, but you're still walking with life, you know, still living in fear and anxiety and depression? Like, how can you explain the fact that somebody that does build a relationship with God, and their life at one point could just be in distraught, but they're still looking, I mean, you see people out there, they're still happy, they're still in a good mood, like everything's cool, everything's kosher. How do you describe
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
What
No,
would
I hear what you're
somebody
saying.
feel that
I,
way?
I totally understand where you're coming from. And um, you make a great point. And so if we saw someone, okay, so if we saw someone who say I have a relationship with the singular consciousness and Krishna is my avatar, and I got a sense of inner peace from that, and I was delivered from this life-threatening situation, and my life is better because of that now. Um, does that make their belief true? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, and I think that's more of a question that you're going to have within yourself, because
Mm,
I mean, that's kind of the beauty of, you know, the journey, is because there's a lot of things that we have full on evidence or full knowledge. Some people just know and they can't explain. But
hmm.
again, a lot of that comes back to walk by faith, not by sight.
Okay, so it's a question of faith.
Yeah.
Okay, how much of faith would you say comprises your 110% confidence? Like if you had to pie chart it out, because you did mention the Bible, you mentioned the confirmations and the feeling of peace. So like so now we have faith that's kind of in there too. So how much of that is faith? That 110%, would you say?
So I'm
And
gonna
I'm
be
only
honest.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna be honest. I think a lot of that changes by the daily. I don't think somebody can say, "Oh, it's like 50% here or 100% here." I think a lot of it is daily, because you know what? Life was never meant to be easy.
Yeah.
And some days, like, there's a lot, I know that there's like a lot of secure evidence within myself. Like, I might see something, or I
Hmm.
might hear like a really good sermon or whatever that gives me a lot of confirmation, and like things make
Yeah.
sense. Like, I can connect the pieces. And then there's some days that are harder, and I have to lean on my faith.
Yeah.
Faith kind of fills in the gap when I am lacking that evidence. But
Okay.
then shortly after, I get confirmation on that.
How much is faith filling in today for you, would you say?
Today, I'm not gonna lie, like, I'm still going through the wilderness right now, a different stage of the wilderness. So right
Hmm.
now, I'm definitely leaning a lot more on my faith.
Okay.
But that can always change by tomorrow. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, like, as I walk through these hard times, like, he uses it for me to be an example for somebody else.
Yeah. Now how do you define faith?
How do I define faith? Is
Yeah.
just trust.
I'm
and
sorry.
and
You broke up right when you said that. Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
is having complete trust.
Complete trust. Okay. And so without that complete trust, and you said it varies, like it's
Yeah.
nebulous, right? Or it varies from day to day, or maybe even hour to hour. But today it's a little bit more than it has been before. Is that a fair way to characterize your faith today? Okay. So your trust is a little bit more today because it sounds like you said, hey, I'm not out of the woods yet, which I'm taking to mean there's some struggles. We all have challenges. You're right. Life is a challenge. You're right. I hear that. And if that faith wasn't there, let's just try to imagine if that faith wasn't there. What would your confidence look like?
So the biggest part about having a relationship with them is faith. And you do get that over time. Once you have it, once you have a confirmation, and once you've experienced him, not just somebody else teaching, but you've experienced him, it's really hard to not have that faith, because it's like doing an everyday thing and knowing how to do it. But, like once you know, in a sense. Without the faith, somebody would be there and questioning, wondering if you even exist.
I see. Okay. So without faith, you would question whether or not God even exists. Even though you've got this other evidence, the confirmations.
Well, okay, let me
the Bible.
Let me stop you there. So what I'm saying is, because with my walk and with where I'm at now, there's no way I can't have faith. Because it's like building a skill almost, right? Like, like even a baby walking, like they're going to stumble a lot before they can get up and run.
Yeah.
If they know how to run, they know how to run. Like there's no going. I mean, unless there's something catastrophic, but as far as the skill set goes, like, how to do the skill, it's hard to go back, on your own free will. So because I am where I'm at, like I have the faith. That's not going to change.
Okay. How possible do you think it is to have faith in something that isn't true?
Well, you would almost have to experience it to be a little bit true to be able to build your faith more, right?
Sure. But isn't it?
So in order to be able to experience it, you also have to have that open willingness mindset and basically, take control of your thoughts and figure out what is good and what is bad and what is true and what is false. Right?
I hear what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. I think what I'm getting at is it possible to think something is true and have faith in it and then later find out it's not true? Is that possible? And I'm not saying it's in your case. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying like Greek gods, for example. Like somebody believes in the Greek gods.
I would know because I haven't been on that journey and I couldn't answer for them.
But you're not sure. So you're not sure if it's possible that you could have faith in something that's ultimately ends up not being true. Like,
I'm going to wrap it back up to the whole love thing that we were talking about too.
Right. I was about to say that.
It is super connected with love and having faith and all that. Same thing with your wife. Like you love her, you trust her, everything's going, even when it's hard. Like you still love her, and you're hoping that things are going to work out, and they work out. The only time that would probably change, right, is if maybe she did something drastic, right, or something. Yeah, she did something drastic that kind of ruined her faith.
Yeah.
But he is never changing. He is who he says he is. He is perfect in all avenues. He is the one that, started the morals and started everything that's right and everything that's supposed to be good and everything that's supposed to be true. And he's never changing. So the only way that could happen is if I was to rebel. But that doesn't necessarily say that he's not real. That just goes to state that I rebelled against to what he's calling me to do.
Yeah.
Or what he has said in the past.
Let me ask you this, Karalyn. Why is this belief important to you?
It's everything to me.
It's everything to you?
It's like seeing in color versus seeing in black and white. Like there's so much more out there with this walk and with this journey with him that I can't even imagine life without him anymore.
Yeah. And what would you say you would be, what would you what would you say you'd be missing if you found out God didn't exist? What would immediately be like a hole in your life? Because you said it's everything to you. So what would be
It would
missing?
be everything. It would be everything.
Everything?
But I mean, there's so much stuff out there that explains, like,
Right.
um, in the Bible, it says too, like, consider how the wildflowers go. You know, they're painted in perfect colors and all that, and nothing's out there to take care of them. Nothing is there to produce those colors or to make sure that they, you know, they are what they are. Or like the
Yeah.
crows. The crows eat, like, they can go, like, again, consider how the crows live. Like, they don't necessarily know when their next meal's coming, but they know it's coming, and they're able to survive off that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. And what value does this belief hold for you?
Immensely. Like, he is number one in my life.
Or I guess what virtue? Like I didn't mean value in the sense of like like a diamond's value. I didn't mean like that. I meant like what virtue? Like when I asked the last guy before you, he said obedience. That's the value that his belief holds for him. So that kind of value, like what virtue would you say?
I mean, it's the relationship. It's like breathing air. Like
The relationship.
he did say obedience, and like I feel like so many people like knock in the head of obedience. But here's the thing: is once you like give your life to him and you surrender, like you're not obedient to be saved. You're obedient because you are saved.
Mm. Mm. So you're obedient because you're saved.
And that still sounds kind of harsh. So let me paint this in a different aspect for maybe somebody, you know, who aren't quite in their walk. It's like having that perfect relationship to the perfect father, right? Like
Okay.
he's constantly cheering you on and wanting you to be the best and wanting you to get the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just want to make him proud. And like everything that, like, to be disobedient is like things that you don't even want or even think of.
Okay. Well, could we kind of explore that for a minute? What would happen if you were disobedient
If I was disobedient
to God? Yeah. What would God do?
I wouldn't get as many blessings. Like I wouldn't have like such this amazing journey that I have if I
Like
was disobedient.
today?
But here's
Okay. In your
we're in the
current
flesh.
life?
We're in the flesh. Like we are gonna be sinners. Like none of us is good enough to make it to heaven. But because he loved us and because Jesus sacrificed, like we are forgiven.
Mm.
And if you look at even like all of Jesus's disciples, like they were tax collectors, they were murderers, they were some of the worst of the worst. And Jesus used him to be his disciples. He used those people to be able to heal and bless others.
Mm. And okay. And so if I'm hearing you right, if you weren't obedient, you wouldn't get blessings in your life now. Like these confirmations,
I wouldn't get as many. I mean, it's like
you wouldn't get as many.
I wouldn't get as many. Again, it's like seeing the world in color and seeing it in black and white. Like I wouldn't have so much peace that I have. I might suffer more from anxiety and depression and all this other stuff if I wasn't turning my eyes and focusing on him. Not so much that it's a punishment, but more of it's a key to like a doorway where, you know, it's all in this doorway. You can choose to either take that door or you can take the other door. It's your choice.
What if you didn't have this sense of peace and you didn't get all these blessings? Like they were far and fewer between. They were just lower quantity number of blessings.
Then I wouldn't be on my walk with him.
Then you wouldn't be on your walk. So what that sounds like is you wouldn't believe in God?
What I'm trying to say is that I wouldn't be like I wouldn't know like I know now. I wouldn't
know.
I wouldn't be on the same path. Like it's like, you know, you're either breathing or you're not breathing in a sense. You're either taking in his blessings and taking in his word and just exploring like him and his ways and having that connection and getting confirmation versus not. I mean, it's like going to bed with your wife every night or not going to bed with your wife every night.
Well, let me share a little bit about me, because I can definitely relate to having challenges in my life. And I would say that, I mean, I wouldn't call it blessings now. I would just say I would call where I am in my life, I'm in a much better place than I was 12 years ago. You know, I got a great relationship. I have, you know, my children are intelligent, they're smart, and they make me proud. You know, for all intents and purposes, my life is pretty chill. I mean, of course, there's things about my life that I want to be better, but you know, we can't all have a perfect life. I would say that I do have a sense of peace about my life. So is it possible then that a person could, is the peace that I'm having, because I would not attribute that to a God, because I don't believe in a God. So how do you suppose I got to that point, if not God?
You know, whether you believe or whether you don't, doesn't mean that he's not involved.
True. Absence of evidence does not equate to evidence of absence. I agree with that. How would I know?
How would you know?
Yeah.
How often have you tried? Of course, again, if you think he exists or doesn't exist, it wouldn't matter if you did it or not. But how have you ever gone and tried to have a connection with him? Like gone in a place where it's quiet. And I like to use nature as, you know, an example, because social media, friends, family, all that, they can be very, very loud. And when God communicates, he whispers.
Yeah. There is a book. It's called God's Voice Within. I was planning to go to seminary school when I was in my first year of college. And so at one point, I was one of those Bible thumpers that you had talked about earlier. I don't think they used the word apologist back then, so I was about that. And then I went through a long journey in my early adulthood with my belief. And there were many times, there was a point where I said that I know that God exists, and that I was in a place where I thought I had connected with God. And I went to, commune with nature and went to silent places. And one of the things that I read this book that I just told you about, God's Voice Within. And that's exactly how the author described it, that God's voice it's subtle. It's a whisper. You can tell it's not God's voice because that voice tends to be very, very loud. So you have to kind of calm yourself, and you have to listen and really listen for it. So I can identify with that. And I thought that that's what I was hearing. And, but as it turned out, that's not the case for me. So that's kind of how my journey went. I went from a staunch Catholic believer to, a non-denominational Christian that went to church every Sunday to where I'm at today.
So can you elaborate on that? Like what?
Sure.
What made you stop thinking that it was of God?
What made me stop believing? Reading the Bible, and then reading other holy books, and seeing the inconsistencies, seeing things that don't make sense, thinking things that I thought were attributed to God, but saying, well, hey, maybe it was something else. How could I know? All these questions I'm asking you, Karalyn, I ask myself. Like, how do I know that these things that I attribute to God, how do I know it's actually God? And I couldn't answer it. And I heard these things like, well, it's just a matter of faith. God doesn't operate that way. God doesn't give you empirical evidence. God doesn't, do it like this. God has his own way of doing things. And it just began to dawn on me. I just started to realize, well, what would my life look like if God wasn't here? If there was no God? And I couldn't honestly see a difference. And that made me understand better that, oh, well, then maybe there is no God.
So obviously, like you've been through addiction, and we know that addiction has a lot of darkness to it, and does a lot too. So you're familiar with strongholds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And personally, and this is my belief, but from seeing what I have seen, like I think that any addiction is one of the enemy's favorite tools, because it does take over your mind, and your mind, like every battle, like I said before, like all that starts with your mindset. How do you debunk, like, by knowing that you don't have any strongholds? Because it's interesting to me, like, seeing or hearing about how you were raised within the church, and I'm just assuming here, but kind of based off of what I've seen, when you are raised in the church, you do a lot of things that you feel like is expected of you, from family, from church members, and like your reasoning, even though it could be like good and true, but it might not be like the right reasoning, like doing it for the right matters, like doing it for yourself or doing it for your walk with him. Because a lot of people feel like they're called into ministry because everybody talks about it, but that doesn't mean that they're actually called into ministry. So again, back to the strongholds, like, do you think, like, by going through what you've gone through and it having such a huge, like, dark impact, do you think, or could it be possible that some of your questioning and different things is not coming of God and is coming from the opposite side?
I mean, it's possible. How would I determine that, though? That's the thing. So answer that question. And then the second question you asked is about the strongholds. My belief in my recovery, and it's a confirmation loop for me. Like, you have confirmation in your life about God, right? I have confirmation in my life about my recovery. If I do these things every day, then I will stay sober. And that has proven itself over time, again and again and again. And
how does that make you different from those who were recovering from addiction or attempting to recover from addiction that weren't able to be on the side that you're on?
It really doesn't. And then I would ask you, because I've sponsored many who were fervent believers in God and have relapsed. So what makes them different from those who were fervent believers and didn't relapse?
I'm going to go back to the whole renewing of the mindset. Like, you can be a believer and you can have a walk. But if you're focusing on things of this world, that's really hard to walk by faith if you're solely focusing on what's of the world. Because there's been, like, blessings, miracles that have been completely unexplainable and science can't base it. So how do you explain that? So how can you, like, fully, like, walk by sight and not by faith when those instances happen?
So when you say miracles, I say unexplained. So that's how I see those. And because because science looks at the natural, right? And there are things that are considered supernatural, and all that means is that science can't explain them.
But how would it not real?
Right, but I'm not saying it's not real. I'm not saying it didn't happen. What I'm asking is, how do you know God did it?
How do you know that he didn't do it?
I'm not asking that, and I don't.
Yeah, I know, but that's exactly what I'm trying to say here. Like, everybody wants, like, physical proof, evidence that he exists, but then they have experience. Like, for instance, I have a cousin who
Mm-hmm.
had stage 4 lung cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave 3 months to live, and she told him that God's gonna heal me, God's gonna heal me, God's gonna heal me, and she still
Mm-hmm.
went through the treatment, even though they said it would be pointless, and she's been in remission for like 2 years now.
That's awesome for her. And
So
congrats
again, like,
to her.
that, but that doesn't make that not true either.
So based on that, what were the steps she took then to get to that point from 3 months to live to remission?
So she did do the treatment, but she solely focused too on her relationship with God. She gave it to him, and she knew. She walked by faith, not by sight. She had the faith that God was going to heal her.
Would you say then that she had the faith that God was going to heal her? Would that faith that she had translate to other people? So say if another person had inoperable stage 4 cancer with 3 months to live, that her faith would heal them too?
Well, it wouldn't be her faith. It still all goes back to God. But
it would all go back to God. So it depends on God.
Yes.
Okay.
Having the faith and having the God. It's like, God's the vehicle, faith is the fuel in a sense.
Right.
Like they go hand in hand, but yeah, like. Okay.
So because I'll also let you know, we had in my family, we had I have someone in my family who's currently in remission, and we didn't pray one time. Not to say that somebody else didn't pray for us. That might have happened. Not to say that God could have just intervened anyway. But how do we demonstrate that, though? How do we know?
I think that's the beauty.
It's we're saying So how do we move that from claim to fact?
See, I think that's the beauty of it. What you just said. Again, it's walk by faith, not by sight. If everything was factual, proven, what would faith be?
That's true, because Hebrews 11:1, right? It's the definition of faith right there. And which I kind of shorten that to, faith is belief without evidence.
Yeah.
And a lot of but if you have faith, if faith is belief without evidence, isn't it possible that you could have faith in something that's not true?
It's possible, but that doesn't mean And
I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying it's possible, right? So
it's possible for. Yeah.
So how would you be able to determine whether or not the faith you have in something is true? How would you determine that for you?
Again, I think it's the same way of just understanding just love in general. Like, I just know.
You just know.
It's not there for me to try to use that to force somebody else to believe. And again, I think that's where...
No. I'm not saying that either.
I'm just getting to another point here. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get like misled away from him is because we are called to love and plant the seed. We're not called to force the plant to grow. I'm not called to force somebody else to believe that he's real. I'm called to love and share my testimony and my walk and hope that he's able to use that to communicate with somebody else.
Then, okay, so you've heard my story, and I gave kind of a brief synopsis. So what would you say then, what was your impression of what reason did you think I had for being an atheist before you heard that story?
I kind of wondered if that was it. Because again, sometimes I stroll in here. Sometimes I don't even get into these like live feeds on atheists because some people, they're just so like decided in their way that you can't even communicate with them. Like it's really hard for somebody to be so raw when somebody else could just be completely closed-minded. But a lot of them come from, religious or cult backgrounds where it's really affected them. Like they have been separated so much from having that relationship because they're so worried about, it's because when they were introduced to it, it was so forced upon on what a lot of religious and churches do. And I can tell you right now that none of mine came from that. Like I strayed away, and I got called back when I was helping a friend in a really bad situation. And then he went through what he was, and then I got strayed away. And then I ended up getting back with people that were somewhat like-minded. And then I strayed away, but then I started building my relationship with him. You know, and I'm not perfect by any means. Like, I've fallen on my face so many different times, and you know, there were situations in my life where it was like, I'm getting older, I'm never going to get married, and I'm never going to have any kids. And then all of a sudden, everything happens back to back to back, especially after I confessed to him. And now my life, even though I do walk through the wilderness in certain events, like, my life is perfect. It's not perfect from what other people may say. And granted, there's a lot of things that I would love to add additionally to it. But it's all coming. It's all coming in pieces. And it's having patience and being open-minded and focusing on the positive and not the negative, and having faith and communing with him and having that time alone with him, away from everybody else that's speaking negativity. You know, like, getting off of social media for a little bit. Stop letting all these biased opinions come in and make me question everything that I know, because I know what I've experienced. And to me, that's truth. To you, because you haven't experienced it. And you know, I don't know where you're at, and I'm gonna say this honestly, like, I pray like he's able to connect with you, because it did seem like you had like a good connection with it, and then things happened, and now you're questioning it. But you can't go and say this is like stern facts on something when it says walk by faith, not by sight. And that's what faith is trusting.
Right. But I'm still trying to understand, though, because, you know, I'm sure we could find a Hindu person with 110% belief, 110% confidence, and that they can cite faith as their reason to believe. But obviously you would think they have faith in the wrong thing. So how could you...
Here's that beautiful part of it, though, too. My walk is not his walk.
Right. Your walk isn't their walk. But what makes it... Because, I mean, you want to believe in true things, right? And you believe in you feel in your heart of hearts that what you believe is true, right?
Right.
And you would feel silly if you found out later it's not true, right? And it would... Right?
Is it my job to go through and try to tell that person everything that they know is wrong?
And that's not what I'm saying.
No,
that's not what I'm saying.
I get what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
But that would be shakeable faith. And mine is unshakable faith.
Okay.
Because I know what I experienced, I know what I went through. And you know, it's really
unshakable. Like, so there's nothing that can falsify it then. Like, it's unfalsifiable.
No.
Nothing.
No.
Okay. So no matter what, even if it stared you right in the face, you would say, I don't believe it.
I think there's a way to kind of express that too. So I don't sound like I'm completely closed-minded. I think in different aspects and different avenues, certain things can talk to you to build on it, but I cannot see what I've experienced, what I witnessed, and what my faith is false. But I'm not going to turn around and tell somebody else that what their faith is false, because I am a believer, like, at the end of time, when we meet our maker, nobody is going to have it completely spot on. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you're going to turn, like, someone that equating, I think that they're not believing in the right thing equals I'm going to tell them they're not believing the right thing. I think those are two different things. Yeah, I'm talking about like what's in your internal mind, and you and I are just having a conversation. So, but I mean, but let's be honest. If you thought that the Hindu person with 110% confidence in their faith was the right faith, you'd be a Hindu. It wouldn't matter, right? So there's a reason why you believe what you believe, because it speaks to you. I mean, you've spent like this last 40 minutes telling me that. And what I'm asking you to do is, if we found a Hindu person that could sit here for 40 minutes and explain to me, you know, here's a great example. Let me take you through this real quick. Let me get your thoughts on this. So about almost a year ago, about 10 months ago, I had a conversation. It was in total, it was about 2.5 hours with a Hindu monk. Hindu monk. So when you hear the word monk, you think pretty devout person, right? So this was a Hindu monk, and he said to me, there is no way that you can convince me that the singular consciousness is not real, because I personally experienced it. I tapped into the singular consciousness. I worked with gurus. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I practiced meditation, and I literally met the singular consciousness. And I've done so multiple times over my life. I was able to do this as a young child. I didn't know what it was. And so I honed it and I practiced it, and I'm able to do that. So this was his personal experience. And I asked him the same questions I asked you. Is there anything that could convince you that this isn't true? And he said, no, there's no way. So his belief is unfalsifiable as well. So if there's only one truth, Karalyn, how could you both be so convinced that yours is the right belief?
Well, here's my question for you. Because if you look at a lot of the monk in the Hinduism, like as far as the baseline, like they believe in love and they believe in a lot of stuff that even the Bible teaches.
Sure.
Now, granted, the Bible has a bunch of different translations and different stories and different points of view. What makes it not that it's not the same thing, but even so, like as a different perspective?
Right. And so it could be a different perspective. So if it's a different perspective, though, couldn't perspective be not true? I mean, it could be. Yeah, you're right. It could be.
But there's a lot of similarities, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. So, but if we're saying, okay, all roads ultimately lead to Rome, well, then does that mean you'll be a Hindu tomorrow and you'll be okay with that?
But again, that's going back to religious base and not the relationship.
Right. But then if you're saying it doesn't matter, then why not just call God the singular consciousness?
Because that's not what I know him by.
Okay. But if God is known by all names, what difference does it make? What difference if it's Allah or singular consciousness or God or Great Spirit, or
whether you call like an orange a tomato or whatever, but it's still an orange.
Right. Yeah.
I guess that's not really a right term, but what I'm trying to say, like, you know, you find one item that's like called several different names in different languages, it's still that same item. That doesn't make it to where it doesn't exist.
Right. So, which I hear what you're saying about that. So then it would be okay if you started calling God the singular consciousness. That would be fine, right?
I personally couldn't do that, but if somebody was in that sense and wanted to call it something different, then call it something different.
Well, if it's all the same, why wouldn't you be able to do that? What does it matter if it's all the same?
Well, what I'm trying to say is, like, if you called, you know, if you called that item that same thing growing up and it's still the same thing, why change it?
Okay. Well, if we go back to your example of the orange, if it's called, you know, something else, you know, in a different language, like French, if you were in France, would you say, oh, I can't eat that because it's not called an orange? Would you do that?
Well, it's still the same relationship. So if they're going and they're meditating on that and I'm meditating on God, that doesn't mean that I'm not meditating. I'm still having that one-on-one time. I agree. I'm not putting them down for doing it the way they've done it. I'm just continuing to doing it the way that it worked for me. But it doesn't mean it's totally different than what they've been studying and what they've been doing. You know what I mean?
I hear what you're saying.
And it's like, you know, the difference between light and darkness. Without light, there's no darkness. Like, they kind of, you know, make the other one coexist. Some people might call it, you know, something completely else. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that it's not possible. That just means that, hey, this is where I started building my relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to keep building my relationship with him. I might be able to hear somebody else's experience that builds my faith more in him, but that doesn't mean that I'm taking away what they have, because mine's called something different. Yeah,
and I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying you're trying to take something away. And I'm not sure how we got to, well, if I just call it this, I'm taking something away from them. Like, I don't see it as a zero-sum game.
Well, so, I'm not trying to have that conversation with you like we're discussing it. I'm just kind of throwing it out there maybe for other people that have what I've seen in a lot of arguments, and I've seen a lot, I'm sure you've seen a lot too, is where people are trying to say, well, it's my way, so your way doesn't exist, your way's not true. You know what I mean? Like, I think more people, if we all just got on the same page and we all acknowledge, like, hey, like, when we give love and we have peace and we go to quiet places, like, our lives are better. You know?
What would
like,
yeah, I hear what you're saying. What would you say is a very easy way for your God to get us all on the same page?
I think for us to have conversations like this.
Wouldn't it be easier if he just showed up?
It would, but how would that build up the faith? Again, if there's factual evidence proven on every, like, if you have to have, you know, proof on everything that exists, like, there's no trust, there's no faith.
Well, why would you need faith if you have proof?
But if you have proof, then that almost kind of tampers a little bit with, you know, having free will in a sense.
It tampers with free will. How so?
If everybody's, well, okay, let's put it this way. Like, even when Jesus walked the earth, people saw him and they had facts that he was there. And they witnessed his blessings, his healings, and all that sort of stuff. And still, some of them didn't believe that that's who it was.
Sure.
So even if you do have evidence, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to believe. But also, like, having that faith kind of makes that relationship a little bit more intimate.
Well, yeah, because people didn't believe in Jesus at first, right? How did they come to believe?
There was still quite a few of them that still didn't believe.
Right, but I'm talking about the ones who did. Like, how did they come to believe? What happened to help them believe?
Because they had faith.
Well, what about the miracles, though?
Because they had faith. How many times have people saw something happen before their lives and say, "Oh no, that didn't happen. I don't."
What other things were happening at that time? You know, like, were other people healing? Were there other people like Jesus healing around at that time?
Some of his disciples were.
Under him. But I'm talking about people, other prophets, independent of Jesus. Were they healing? Were they, you know, healing leprosy? Were they the hemorrhaging woman who had been hemorrhaging for, I don't know, 19 years or whatever it was? The one who just touched his cloak and was healed? Were there other prophets doing that? Or was it just him?
I believe it was just him.
So he actually did something, and people started believing in him. So he actually had to do something. He wasn't just walking around talking, or he just wasn't walking around. He actually did something. There was activity in that, right? So, okay.
But that still happens today, right? Like, people are getting healed, like, supernaturally, even though he's not physically here. They're healed, like, that's a fact.
Right.
People still don't believe. But even when he was healing in the physical presence, there were still some people that were not choosing to believe.
Yeah. And there's people, there are people who aren't choosing to believe. There are people today who are healing not in the name of Jesus. There are many, many claims of that. I mean, if you just look up gurus in India, they're healing people. There's one guru in particular. I can't think of his name, but you can look at it on Google. And there's videos of this guy healing people. And there are millions of people who believe in this guy. And it's not in the name of Jesus.
But you have to be very discerning on that too, because even in Revelations, it even talks about the Antichrist will be able to do healings and still deny that he doesn't exist.
But couldn't somebody say that about you?
They can say that. I mean, that's a nice thing about free will. People can say anything they want. But one thing, though, is the Antichrist does deny that God doesn't exist.
Right. But if they can say that about you and you can say that about them, it's like, you've seen that meme where the Spider-Mans are pointing at each other in the alley? You know, you've seen that?
No, I haven't.
Like, oh, you haven't? Okay, so it's two Spider-Men, it's a cartoon, two Spider-Men, and they're dressed exactly the same, they're pointing at each other. Presumably to say, no, he's the imposter. No, he's the imposter. So how would you tell? I like how, this is kind of going back to what I've been asking you. How would you know? Like, how could we figure that out? Because if you're saying no, this, because you're the Antichrist. If you don't do it in the name of Jesus, it's the Antichrist. It's this. But they're saying in their religion,
hang on. I'm not saying that it is Antichrist, but it does say that he will do that. Not saying that everybody's the Antichrist.
Well, yeah, but okay. Well, you're making that clear because I think you're trying to be like politically and diplomatic about this, but I mean.
Well, no, I mean, like I said, I'm just stating in the Bible it does warn that the Antichrist will make healings and stuff and deny that his existing. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean that particular person is the Antichrist. They just it just wants to be able to discern. So that's where I'm trying to come up with that.
They just won't be able to discern. Okay.
Well, no, you will have to be able to discern on whether they are or they aren't. I'm just
is the guru okay? So is the guru that's in India that people claim are healing? Let's just assume that that's happening, that's true. Is that in the name of your God?
Well, again, like you said, let's assume. I can't go off of base assumption. I have to make my own discernment.
Yeah, but we're kind of doing the let's assume. We're doing the let's assume thing. We're just assuming this is true. Is it under the name of your God? This is just an assumption. So
exactly, it is the assumption. I can't say that it is my God or not because I haven't seen any of that. So that's like me telling you, like, well, just assume that God is real and just do this. Well, it's like, well, you're stating that you don't know if he is or not. I'm not going to make that statement stating that it is or it isn't of him because this is the first time that I've heard that.
Okay. So just the same, is it, so now do you understand why I don't believe in God? Because to me, it's the same exact thing. I have to make too many assumptions. I have to assume God is real for all these things to be true. So if you're saying, well, I can't assume that it's true, I have to actually see it. Well, isn't that the same thing I'm saying? So why is it okay for you, but it's not okay for me?
Well, I'm not saying that it's not okay for you. We're just having that conversation.
Right, we're having a conversation. Well, because you were asking me, well, how did you get to this point? I don't understand how you got to this point. But that's exactly it. So you do understand.
Well, I never said that I didn't understand. I just said, how did you get to this point? But again, like, I have to have faith and trust in my walk and my relationship with him. And he has done blessings and stuff that hasn't been a call to him. He has taken chances and he has used people before that have been atheists, whether they know it or not. Just because somebody believes in one thing or doesn't believe in another, like you said before, doesn't mean that it's not true.
Right. And yeah, we went over that earlier. And so I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying that your walk is not legit. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying you're delusional or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just asking you, how do you know it's true? And it sounds like at the end of the day, you're saying, because I know. I just know. So how would I be able to, so when somebody else from another belief tells me that, like, here's a great thing. Do you have kids, by the way? Do you have kids? You do. Have they ever said that to you? Have they ever said, like, my kids have said this to me so many times. I don't want to go to this. I don't want to go to the water slide. Well, why not? I just don't. Well, why though? Like, why don't you want to go? Because I don't want to go. I just don't. And what, or have you ever had this? I just went through this the other day. No, I didn't do my homework. Well, why not? Because I didn't. Well, yeah, I know you didn't do your homework, but why not? Well, because I didn't want to. Why not? Why didn't you want to? What was the reason why? Well, just because I didn't. Like, how can I, what do you do with that? You see where I'm going with this? What do you do with it? Like,
but it's still kind of a different. I can tell you that I know because I do receive the confirmation and I do feel his presence and I do see him and I can't
expect that.
I can't explain it to a sense that you might fully understand because you weren't there.
Yeah,
And I think
of
that's
course.
where a lot of people wander is because they don't feel and they don't see. And again, like you almost have to be in a quiet space or to be able to be in tune with it to be able to experience it. Now, as far as my kids and stuff, and I will say this, like my husband's grandma, she had an amazing relationship with Christ. And I don't know if you've ever been around people like this, but she just had like a glow and like so much positive energy around her at all times. Like it was unexplainable. And all the kids have been around her and they've all experienced that and all of them crave that. So as far as like, you know, going to church and different things like that, none of them have ever felt that it was forced on. They've all been willing to go. Granted, everybody has their periods where, you know, they do fall. But again, it's like if you're watching a video of a heater turned on, you can't feel the heat because you're not there. That doesn't mean that it's not true and it's not real. You know, and
yeah, true. I totally agree with that. 100%. 100% agree. So you and I have that in common.
That's where a lot of that comes from. And, you know, my biggest thing that I try to get clear is I feel like there are a lot of false teachings out there that have driven people away. And there's been like this awkward expectation when it comes to religions and church that isn't what he is trying to push. And having that understanding that his is a little bit different and more intimate and more loving, you know, and so again, like there's so much, like when people want to know like what it is or how it feels, I think a lot of it is as if you ever have been in true love. Like it's a feeling, you know, just like your kids, like you love your kids different than you love your wife. It's a different feeling, but it's still strong and it's still bold.
Yeah.
Same thing that I'm experiencing. Now, as far as Hindu and stuff, I've never had a conversation with somebody that was Muslim or a different, you know, different religion. So I don't even know if they have had those same feelings or if they've had that same intimate connection. But I definitely feel like the bottom line that where the higher power is calling us to love and discern and not to be offended and to be able to control our own thought process and not fill it with so much negativity and questions and things to where we are stolen, like our blessings are stolen from us.
Well, I will say this, just going back to the Hindu monk I was telling you about earlier, I think he described it very well. It was a very interesting way he described it. He said, the feeling, the knowledge that I have, what I know and what I saw, because he essentially said the same thing. I know because I know. And he said, it's me trying to describe it to you is like trying to describe the sweetness of honey to someone who's never had it before. Like it's a different kind of sweet. Wouldn't you agree with that? Like it's different than maple syrup and sugar and all that, right? And he said, that's how it is. Does that ring to you? Does that resonate with you? Yeah. So that's something you guys have in common. So and I would say that my deconstruction, there's a lot of that statement rings true for my deconstruction as well. That it just, you know, my journey is, you wouldn't really understand unless you knew, unless you went through it with me. So.
And I think a big thing that we need to like kind of call ourselves back to is what do you give power to?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Are you giving all your power, your emotion, your thought process to that one negative situation, or are you giving all that positive power to becoming, like overcoming that situation? Are you focused on the negative or are you focused on the positive? And,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Wow, Karalyn, this has been an amazing conversation. What'd you think about it?
I think it was good.
Yeah, me too. So I think this is the reason I come on here, is to kind of demonstrate that you can have a civil, open conversation like this and not get heated. People don't get cut off, or shut down, dismissed, anything like that. That it can just be a back and forth.
Right.
So that's the main reason I have it. So I really appreciate you coming up. I do have to go because my wife is now home from her spa day.
I have to go too. We're supposed to be going camping, and I'm.
Oh goodness! And you spend time with me. Wow. Well, I thank you for that. Thank you. I'm honored that you chose to spend time with me. That you put your life on hold like that. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, enjoy your camping trip. Thank you very much. And hopefully, if I'll see you again, and maybe we can pick it up somewhere else. We can talk more.
Good.
All right. Take care, Karalyn.
Take care. God bless.
All right.